We know the defense needs help. I guess the offense could use some help as well. Not necessarily perfect on that side of the ball. So why not bring in some big time experience? Welcome to Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Episode number 214. Steve Hellwagon's up top with me. Bucknuts 247 Sports. We got Kevin Noon right below me. Buckeye Huddle, also the Big Me podcast, and Tony Gerdebin, the Buckeye Huddle, as well as Buckeye Weekly's the podcast and college football playbooks right here on YouTube. You got to check it out. We will leave the link in the chat. And speaking of the chat, leave those comments and questions. All right, guys, how we doing today?
Good.
Doing great.
How was the trip, Kevin?
Long. It was a long trip. I used to always chart the mileage, but I kind of gave up on it. We were getting into some large numbers, but made our way through Charlotte all the way down to Fort Lauderdale and back up. A lot of good content that came out of it, but I'm not even willing to drive to the grocery store at this point. I'm done driving for a while.
Yeah, you didn't get that support from Steve riding along in the back seat to push you forward.
I don't know why they didn't take me up on my offer. I said I wasn't going to drive. I don't need to drive. I'll just tag along for comic relief in the back seat. Him and Givler, just try and crack them up. Keep the mood light, some levity, some hilarity, just whatever. I'll even agree. We'll all interview the guys together, and you guys can post your interviews on a 12-hour embargo. And I'll just
the last time you said 45 minutes, which was completely unacceptable.
Those terms were not acceptable. Plus the idea that I would not pitch in and drive at all.
I don't mind the driving part as much as the 45 minutes. That was a no-go.
Not giving me much lead time there, are you?
No.
Yeah, it's funny because Mark Givler, who was with Kevin on their Southern Swing, like he flew home to go to Massillon for a 7-on-7, and I was gonna ride with them. And Mark's like, you don't need to come. It felt to me like he just wanted to be alone for a while because he had been with somebody for so long. He's like, you know what? I would just like to drive somewhere on my own. So I bowed out of going to a 7-on-7 tournament at Massillon because apparently Kevin had driven Mark crazy.
A 7-on-7 tournament where one team pulled out because it didn't have enough receivers due to baseball, and another team was sent home because they didn't have helmets. So, I think Tony was the big winner there.
Helmets are required still. Yes. I guess.
No,
even though it's 7-on-7, I guess they are requiring the helmets. Yes.
You really don't need them in that. I mean, in a lot of places you wear just those soft, like dome type things, but Ohio's just dipping its toe in the pool of any spring football activity, and it's probably going to take a couple years for them to be able to tune it in, much like tuning in the CW, where the Pac-12 will probably end up.
Folks, leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to them. Consider supporting us here at Voice of College Football. And here we go. Sorry, Tony, I didn't hear you pipe in there. But the big news of the last 24 hours, Steve, is Joe Philbin, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, as an offensive coordinator for a Super Bowl winner, possibly Miami Dolphins. I'm going on memory here. Dallas Cowboys offensive line coach, not going by memory there. I did see that online. Last 3 seasons with the Cowboys. Guy that's been around and been successful.
Yeah, I mean, how exciting can this be to hire an offensive analyst or consultant or whatever the term is to help out Brian Hartline, who has been there and done that for the last 30 years. I mean, this guy's resume, it was pointed out to me that he worked for Tom Lichtenberg, who was a former Ohio State assistant at Ohio University in Lichtenberg's last season in 1994, and they were 0-11 that year, Ohio University was. And I can actually tell you, I was at a game that year. My father-in-law played at Ohio University and was there for a reunion, and we went down there to see the Miami game. May have been homecoming or something, and they got smoked, and Ohio State was beating Michigan State on that fateful Saturday. Watched that at the sports bar and then went over. But Joe Philbin was in the stadium that day at Ohio University, and eventually, as it went on, was at Northwestern with Gary Barnett in 95 and 96. 95, they won the Big Ten and went to the Rose Bowl and lost to USC. They won the Big Ten outright that year because Ohio State lost to Michigan. The two teams didn't play. And 96, they had a pretty good team as well. They moved on to Iowa and was there in 2002 when they shared the Big Ten championship with Ohio State. Again, they didn't play each other. Ohio State won the national championship that year, and Iowa won a share of the Big Ten at 8-0. And from that point on, he's been in the NFL for the last 2 decades. I mean, pretty much nonstop. As you guys said, Green Bay, predominantly offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, had a year or 2 in there as a tight ends coach, 4 seasons as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, 2012 to 2015, and then back to Green Bay, and then on to Dallas Cowboys as offensive line coach. And, just so much experience this guy brings. And when I think about it, it's twofold. One, you have Justin Fry, who's trying to break in 3 new starters on the offensive line. And so you bring in a veteran offensive line guru, as our friend Tim May likes to say, a guru. And this guy is going to help Justin Fry. It's kind of like the wet wash rag that you are going to squeeze every last drop of productivity out of this makeshift offensive line. And so that's the first thing. And guys, I came out of spring ball pretty much bullish on every facet of this football team, with the notable exception of the offensive line. So if Joe Philbin can help the offensive line get over the finish line, that's the one piece missing, dare I say it, from this team, not only playing for, but also winning, God forbid, winning the national championship in 2023. Because the quarterback, we don't know how good they are because we don't know, he played behind a crappy offensive line in the spring. So get the offensive line short away. That's the first thing. Second thing, rookie offensive coordinator Brian Hartline worked with Joe Philbin with the Miami Dolphins. I think that's where the entree came, that why this hire was made, that Hartline's like, this guy's out of work. This guy knows football. I know this guy personally. Let's get him in here to maximize what we can do this year. And he'll be sitting basically right over his shoulder during the meetings all week long, watching the practice tape, helping them devise the game plan. He'll do everything short of calling the plays probably with Brian Hartline on Saturday. And to me, you can't have enough people, good people around you who know what they're doing. And if there's anybody that a rookie offensive coordinator could use in a pinch like this, I'd say it's Joe Philbin. So this is a home run hire in every sense of the way. I don't know him, never met him, don't know if he's good, bad, or indifferent, but his experience, he was on a Super Bowl winner in 2010, Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, beat Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. I know that was 13, 14 years ago. I don't care. This guy's been there. He's done it. And this to me is if they can't win it with the players that they have and with the coaches and the support that they have, then at least they can say that Ryan Day pushed every last chip into the center of the table with the hand that he was dealt to try and bluff his way to a national championship. So, I commend Brian Hartline and Ryan Day for this one because, it takes a real man to say, hey, I need help. And they found it, I think, with Joe Philbin. I'm interested to hear what the others have to say.
Well, I think this is one of those hires that Nick Saban makes, and Ohio State fans are like, why doesn't Ohio State do that? And so you've got this guy, you've got Justin Fry, you've got Mike Soline, the GA, the offensive line GA, and now you add in Joe Philbin. Now Joe Philbin can't do any on-field coaching, but he can do everything short of that. And as long as nobody's looking, he can do whatever else. But so you've got the more hands on this offensive line, the better, because we were talking about this on Buckeye Weekly podcast this week about how the concern coming out of spring was right tackle, and maybe that concern overshadowed what concern there should be at center and left tackle as well. Like this blinding light of who's it going to be at right tackle kind of drowns out what's going on at left tackle. Josh Farrett, is he good enough? And what's going on with center is Carson Hinsman the guy? Is it going to be Jacob James when he returns healthy? Is it going to be Victor Cutler once he knows the offense and is accustomed to playing center again after playing left tackle last year? So there's all of these different things that have to come together. And so another guy to help that come together is good. I do wonder, though, Joe Philbin being the head coach who cut Brian Hartline from the Dolphins, is this a revenge hire? Is this one of these things where Hartline's just going to be like, I need coffee, go get me coffee, and just really, really make his life miserable?
I don't think so.
Well, adding third here once again leaves me with nothing to say after Tony and Steve say pretty much everything. That would really be the long game there, to sit there, he gets his little office set up, everything else. He stocks his little mini fridge with Gatorades and everything else. It's like, oh, by the way, get out. That would be the longest of long games. But, all joking aside, I think this is a really solid hire. You are bringing in somebody who has those offensive line chops, and that's not necessarily a thing about Justin Fry. I mean, that's just a case of, Nick Saban, this is the perfect example. Nick Saban has surrounded himself with a deep roster of analysts and QC and GAs and everything else, and Ohio State was probably a little slower than some of the other major powers to really get into it. Now you go out and you get this guy, and it's just another person that can sit there and help with the planning and help with a lot of these types of things. And while you don't have the on-field coaching per se, there's still a lot of things that you can do and still stay compliant of the NC2A rules. So this is a good move, and something that I see as as a net positive for Ohio State, as we're watching things and talking about the unfinished contracts of the Big Ten under Kevin Warren and everything else, and how people are going to have to sit there and account for all their nickels and dimes. Well, Ohio State's going to be dropping a few nickels and dimes to bring Joe Philbin in, but well worth it when you're near or at the top of the mountain.
Drew McFly is saying that Philbin is a good coach, but there's a reason the Cowboys didn't bring him back. Yeah, Ohio State's not asking him to be the offensive line coach. They're just asking him to help out with the offensive line and follow Justin Fry's lead. So I don't think there is a bad spin you can put on this, because this is not Joe Philbin's offense. It is not, he's just here to make lives easier. As assistant coaches will say, like, my job is to assist the head coach. His job will be to assist the assistant coaches.
Kevin, I call on you last because you're going to have the ability to dig out those hidden gems and nuggets that these other two can't in any way. They hit all the obvious points.
I've had the cat and the dog fighting within a foot of me, like half of the show. So that's another reason why I really lay out there, because so much has been said, and I just don't want to be redundant, because I'm sitting there trying to keep them from spilling over into the camera shot and onto the computer.
Again, any way we can go viral, Kevin, it's allowed. That's fine. We're going to see dogs and cats fight. That would be could be a plus. Chad is asking, guys, Kevin, you can go first on this one. I've been wondering, Urban Meyer had someone fully dedicated to studying the team up north week in and week out. Does Coach Day do that, or will he do that? Got to win this year.
Michigan isn't doing anything that Ohio State is unaware of. Michigan is just executing. You could sit there and have somebody study it at length. It doesn't matter. It's not like Michigan has reinvented the wheel. It's not as if Michigan has sandbag players throughout the season and suddenly they appear in the game. It is a case of Michigan going out there and out executing Ohio State, plain and simple. So I don't really see the necessity of having somebody doing that. Jim Harbaugh, with his quirks and some of the weird things that he may do out there, still is pretty straightforward in a lot of the things that we see on the field. And that's not, I mean, if you can do them well, that's not a bad thing. And they've been able to do them well in that game at the end of November. So no, I don't think that you necessarily task somebody with that. I mean, I guess when you sit there and you have a bigger coaching staff with all these other levels and analysts and everything else, maybe you can have somebody who's focused a little more there. But I guarantee you, especially once you get into league play and you start seeing crossover film, everybody is readily aware of what Michigan's doing.
And not only that, Kevin, they went out and beat Ohio State without their best player last year with Blake Corum. I mean, he didn't hardly even play in the game. So, and they just whomped Ohio State in Ohio Stadium. So, I don't think that that there's any kind of hocus pocus or magic that Michigan has used. They've lined up and really blown Ohio State off the ball. And I mean, it was really bad the year before. Last year was the defensive deficiencies for Ohio State, giving up 5 touchdowns of longer than 35 or 40 yards, and couldn't, God, falling down, just God, why bring it up? You Mark, you sent us a link last night about coming on a podcast about the Clemson 2019.
Oh, you missed out.
Team. Oh, no, I didn't. I was sticking needles in my eyes. That was fine. And now we're bringing up the Michigan game from last year. We're playing Michigan, period. But I'm just kidding, of course. Obviously, this is a hurdle Ohio State's got to get over. And, the questioner brings up a great point and Tony does his Michigan Monday thing, some of it in jest to kind of tweak Ohio State fans. I'm sure that, Michigan's your big deal, isn't it? But it is important. And we were kind of talking internally, about name, image, and likeness and all these other things that are being done kind of behind the scenes, cloak and dagger, and how for Ohio State fans, it's like, don't tell me about the pain, just show me the baby, which the baby in this case is sign shiny recruits who are ranked in the top 20 nationally in a top 5 quarterback every year and nobody gets hurt, and beat Michigan. Those are the only 2 things that matter to the rank and file Ohio State fan, is sign shiny recruits, December through October, and then in November beat Michigan. If you do those 2 things, you're going to be okay.
I question I question the premise of the original statement. Like, have we confirmed that Urban had somebody like that, or is that legend?
A lot of urban legends out there.
Yeah.
Some of them about Urban Meyer.
Sorry, Mark, what were you going to say?
Well, Michigan Monday, as soon as Steve brought that up, I thought, what has been the change in tone of Michigan Monday, each Monday now compared to like 2 years ago?
No, I don't know that. I think the change in tone, it depends. There probably is. There is a change in tone depending on how bad things are, because I know there are Michigan fans who hated when I took that over in 2007. And then, yes, why did they hate that? Because I ended up having to write about the Rich Rod years, so of course they don't like that. There's tone there. And of course the Brady Hoke years, but the tone just fluctuates with, are they playing well? Are they not? And so right now the tone is, they're playing, obviously they're playing well, but there's still flaws, as you saw when Illinois nearly beat them last year. You saw it with TCU. So, honestly, me speaking for myself, I think the tone is pretty even-handed over the most recent part of the years. Like the Rich Rod years, yeah, I went in on them. Why not? It was fun. Everybody was having a good time. It was a different era. But I think I'm pretty even-handed with them. With Sue's question, do you see us hiring a defensive analyst this year as well? Like, there's probably still some hirings going on. If you look at the coaching roster for Ohio State this year, they've got 3 quality control coaches on defense, 2 grad assistants on defense, 2 program assistants on defense. So there are plenty of hands to help out, but I'm sure they've recently hired
Mike Dawson was a new hire from Nebraska,
right?
And he works with ends and linebackers traditionally.
So yeah, it's like the reason we haven't really talked about that is because he wasn't a former NFL head coach. But yeah, a lot of these things happen behind the scenes, and the only time they really come up is if there's a connection, like James Laurinaitis, or when Coy McFarland came over from Oklahoma State with Jim Knowles. So you talk about it, like if these guys are really under the radar type of things, and we wouldn't even be. I don't know that we'd even be talking about if Pete Thamel didn't report it yesterday.
The other thing that Pete Thamel came out with this week, of course, was this series of blunders by Kevin Warren, which I found it very interesting to read through the details and the miscommunications and the lack of communications, all of that. I found the article interesting, but the conclusion that I came to was nothing's going to change. This isn't a big deal. Kevin, how did you take that?
Well, I'm going to yield most of my time back to the gentleman from Northwest Ohio, Mr. Tony Gerdeman, but it was pretty shocking when I read it. And honestly, I think that the biggest thing that stood out to me was him giving away a game that wasn't his to give away in terms of the 26 Big Ten championship. Again, I said I'd be brief here because I know Tony's done at least one show on this and probably has more prepared comments than I do. The pushback about the November night games is pretty insignificant to me. I mean, if coaches are complaining about it, coaches are complaining about it, but it's cold in November, whether or not it's 11 a.m. or 3 p.m. or 7 p.m. I go back to, 2014 and the game Ohio State played at Minnesota. JT Barrett is still running that 86-yard touchdown back. It was 15 degrees at kickoff, and I really don't think we're going to see a lot of November night games of where it's going to go off at 15 degrees or colder. So just kind of a comedy of errors. And was it a poison pill left by Kevin Warren not signing all the deals? Was it gross incompetence, or a combination of the two?
A combination of all of that. Yeah, we did this week's Tuesday's Buckeye Weekly pretty much, I think, about this entire topic. So I won't go too far because I'll leave some stuff for Steve. But the November night games, I don't understand how athletic directors could see something called Big Ten Saturday Night on NBC and not realize that this meant Saturday Night Football throughout the entire season and not just September and October. November was part of that. You're not going to get paid 100% of, like, NBC's not paying the same amount as CBS for 2/3 of the same number of games. So there's some intellectual dishonesty there. And also I don't blame coaches for not being aware of this because coaches are in their bubble. They're not worried about TV contracts. They just spend the money and ask for things. But for the disconnect, the lack of communication from Warren to the ADs to the coaches, that is nothing new, and that has been one of the lasting legacies. The real legacies are the TV money and all of that, but one of the through lines through all of this is the lack of communication from Kevin Warren. But the giving away the Big Ten championship game, but I still think the most egregious thing is the Big Ten hiring a search firm to decide if they should give Kevin Warren a bonus when there's no language for a bonus in the contract for Kevin Warren's contract. So you have so much money that you're going to spend more money to decide if you should give more money to somebody when that wasn't even part of their contract. And he's left you in a bit of a lurch. Yeah, you've got all this money that you're going to be spending, but you still have to sign these deals. So a little bit of a comedy of errors, and the Big Ten isn't laughing.
Yeah, it's a complete disaster. and having said that, I agree with the premise that it's all going to get worked out because there's so much money at stake. There were two pieces about this. One, that they have to pay back Fox $25 million from the COVID year. I'm like, the COVID year was like 3 years ago. What, why, why are they still talking about this 3 years later? And hell yeah, everybody knew that they were going to have to give back 25 million. That's not, the revelation to me is that hasn't been taken care of, and why Fox hasn't just deducted that from future payments to the Big Ten. And then the other part of this that is interesting is like, well, that the colleges have gotten a bill from Fox already about a title game in 2026. I mean, wouldn't they pay for the rights for that in 2026? I'm confused why. I mean, they're not paying the entire freight of this thing 3-4 years out in advance. I don't understand why. Maybe Fox sent a letter of information to all the colleges to say, this is what your ex-commissioner just did to us, your best TV partner. There's a lot to this. As part of his outgoing thing, Jim Delaney like insulated Fox and the Big Ten Network and said, basically, we're going to sell the rights to our games to them, and now they're going to turn around and sell them to other partners. I don't understand why there's a middleman involved in this, namely Fox and Big Ten Network, which the Big Ten does have a 49% stake in. Like, is Big Ten Network siphoning off and Fox siphoning off money from NBC and CBS that should go to the Big Ten and the colleges? What rationale did they have to put that in there other than Fox probably wanted a protection that for everything it is put into Big Ten Network, that in perpetuity, the Big Ten Network is going to be adhered to the hip of the Big Ten. They'll always have programming, basically. I mean, you can't have a Big Ten Network without cooperation from the Big Ten and live games from the Big Ten. So, but I don't understand why he insulated that. And it's not really well explained in the Thimel article why. I mean, Fox was involved in the discussions with NBC and CBS and ESPN and whoever else came to the table, the streaming people,
the digitals and everything else.
Whoever, they were all involved in that. That's something I don't understand. And, basically you've given value to Fox for something that they're not earning. I don't, other than they're a consultant, I guess, and maybe they help you drive a bigger bargain with NBC and CBS because CBS is paying 10 times as much money for this package as they were for the SEC, which tells you they were making many, many, many millions of dollars off that cheap SEC deal from 10, 15 years ago that is, kind of going out the window after this season for them. So that's one thing. NBC night games in November. There's a really easy compromise on this. First of all, the last weekend of November, the Thanksgiving weekend, I guess they're going to give them a Michigan State, Penn State game on Black Friday, either in prime time or late afternoon or something, in addition to somebody, FS1 or Big Ten Network having Nebraska, Iowa again, I guess. As a make good, they're giving them like a standalone game. It's what the article read. They got somebody to compromise on that. So that'll be like a national broadcast for NBC. So that's one compromise for 2023. But going forward, this is very simple. Mm-hmm. The last Saturday of November, you're going to get either a UCLA home game against USC or you're going to get the USC home game against Notre Dame every other year. That's what you get the last Saturday in November. That's what you get. Fox can't show that game at noon Eastern time. So that's what you get. That's your thing. And whether it has an impact on the Big Ten standings or not, so be it. Up till that, Ohio State's doing November 11th this year, which is the latest night game Ohio State's ever had for Michigan State. That just leaves that 1 week in the middle, November 18th. How are you going to solve that one? I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do there, because Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State want no part of that. Because if it's a road game on November the 18th and suddenly a blizzard blows through, well, there goes your Big Ten championship. Possibly there goes your playoff berth. So that makes no sense to be stuck in a snow bowl, on November.
But a blizzard could happen during the day. I mean, it's a blizzard's a blizzard, and let's be honest, it's not. I mean, I'll speak of Ohio. I don't really prepare for snow in November or whatever. That's what, December, January, whatever. January, February. It's I don't know. I understand the apprehension of having those games, and it's very easy for me to say, screw it, play them all at night because I'm in the press box. So I mean, it's whatever. But I don't know. I think one thing though that's interesting is that Fox and BTN by extension are really protecting BTN as we sit there, and Pac-12 network has never had any traction, seen in tens of homes. And what's going to happen with ACC network if the Super 7 over there in the ACC managed to crack that grant of rights? So right now, once again, we talk about how this is shaping up to be the Big Two and everybody else. The SEC network seems to be very successful, and the Big Ten network seems to be very successful. And, there's really I don't think there's a Big 12 network. There is Longhorn Network, which will get rolled into SEC network, I guess, somehow when Texas moves over. But a lot of moving pieces and a lot of fun little storylines for those people like me who really enjoy kind of the media, scuttle.
They don't owe Kevin Warren another dime. I mean, they should just, he's lucky they don't sue him for, malpractice or whatever. I don't know. Just whatever.
So yesterday or the day before, I was looking at like the average November temperatures in Columbus and Lincoln, Nebraska. And, it's 40s and 50s on average. I'm just looking last year, the last 15 days of the month, there were 6 days with a high in the 30s and like 8 highs in the 50s. And obviously you're not playing with it's going to be night, so it's going to be colder than that, but no snowfall really. We get more snow. I'm more concerned about snow in March than I am in November. And if it happens, it was going to be a random thing anyway. But of course, Minnesota, nobody's expecting Minnesota to host a November night game. Although we have seen the first week in November, there have been some night games over the years. I think, Michigan needs to play a part in this, and they're kind of dragging their feet now. The whole network draft thing comes into play as well, but Michigan hosts Purdue the first weekend in November. That would be a perfect night game for them. It's a good game, but that also may be Fox's game. So I'm with Steve though. What you don't want to do, and I think that's why Ohio State said we will gladly take we will offer ourselves as tribute basically for this Michigan State, because it's the second week of November. You don't want to do it the third week in November because the following week is Michigan. So fine, we'll host Michigan State. Let's just get it done. And look what we're doing. We're trying to be helpful. James Franklin probably has to, I would assume he's furious about having to play a Friday night game, Black Friday, against Michigan State and short week or whatever. I think it's pretty cool that there's going to be, I assume, a Black Friday doubleheader, though. I think that's good for the Big Ten. But, as Steve said, moving forward, 2 or 3 of these games will just be in California, and it's not going to be an issue. Like if you want to have USC, UCLA, USC, like 3 weeks in a row, that seems like an easy fix.
I mean, that's still a pretty big TV market, isn't it? To me, I mean, NBC just needs to cool their jets a little bit, I think. And, methinks she doth protest too much. I think that they're pounding the table to get whatever concessions they can get. They should be only too happy that they're involved with the Big Ten, at $300 million a year. So just shut up and, whatever.
I do wonder when the 2024 contract or the schedule comes out, if there's going to be some sort of let's try to manipulate this so NBC can have some games, that are good, if they're going to try and schedule it that way, so that there's more than just one marquee game. And really, with the addition of USC, there should be at least 2 or 3 marquee games every week, but where that is taking into consideration on, maybe we better put this game here because that allows our partners to have a better primetime contest rather than you got Maryland and Indiana, something like that.
It sounds to me like Tony's pushing for like the Big Ten to do the NFL flex schedule or whatever, so nobody will know what's going on at any given time.
Can you
we
believe
got
they're
6 days.
Thursday night games now? They're going to flex Thursday freak. They're going to move a game from Sunday 4 days up. I assume they're going to do it on at least 4 weeks notice, but I don't know. Didn't know if that got reported what the notice is, but I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's 28 days, and they don't expect to have to use it, but we'll see.
More than twice, yeah.
I do understand NBC's reservation that if they're just thrown California games with the thought that, okay, we're going to have to hope that those teams are in the mix and those are the most prominent games. No, that's not what we're paying for. We're paying for this selection process that we signed up for. So, that's not necessarily sure. Sometimes
but Wisconsin at USC, I mean, I think there's enough competition for USC to make it interesting. Sorry to interrupt, Mark.
Just get ready
Absolutely.
for Ohio State at USC or Ohio State at UCLA being November 18th every year going into the Michigan game.
Well, yeah, if they go to the idea that they're going to move to week 0 as the new week 1, then that kind of alleviates some of the issue because the last week will be November 18th. So, and then the championship game would be Thanksgiving weekend. So maybe that's one way that they'll get around this conundrum with, whatever it is. But I understand where they're coming from. They want, if they're paying top dollar, they want value at the same time. I put this on our message board. It's like they need to have 3 games featuring the front line. So 6 of the 8 or 9 real football entity schools need to be playing each other almost every week of the season to make CBS, Fox, and NBC whole on this deal. And that's going to be hard to do because now instead of playing, parity scheduling, you're playing the top teams only 3 or 4 times. You may have to play them 4 or 5 times. And then you enter a situation where you can get knocked out of a playoff bid if you end up 8-4 or 9-3. So, I don't know. It's going to be, the idea of parity in the Big Ten seems like such a crazy topic given what we've seen over the last 20 years. So, it's Ohio State and everybody else for the last 20 years.
More money, more problems.
That's it.
And I think this is where the conclusion is that NBC is going to get its games, and they're going to get the games that they signed up for. They're going to get the quality of games that they signed up for, and the Big Ten is going to get paid. I think it all is going to be well, and there might be a lot of pissed off people in between, but the 2 entities that matter will get paid and will get delivered their product.
One quick thought. The whole Thamel article just illustrated the complete lack of collaboration and communication from the ivory tower in Chicago, Kevin Warren and all of his underlings, down to the presidents, athletic directors, and coaches. There is no synergy going up and no synergy going down. And that's what Petitti, the new commissioner, has got to rebuild. He has got to get everybody in a room and say, I'm here for you. You're here for us. Let's all kumbaya. Let's march to the beat of one drum. And if you got a problem, come see me. Come see me and talk to me, and we'll get it worked out to the best that we can. It was Kevin Warren was, I am the dictator and I am the ruler of all that I see, and everybody can piss off, basically was his way of managing this thing for the last 3 years. And the Izzos and whoever else you want to insert had no input into any of this. And Ferentz's or whoever, the deans were not consulted on any of this. And it's not right. They're the protectors of their sport. And if there's no communication between whoever's at that job down to the guys in the field, the coaches, then there's even less communication from the Big Ten to the schools to the fans, and it's just crap on the fans again. It's all just a television show, and they don't care about you as the end user, the one who, unless you watch on television, they couldn't care less about you. And that's the feeling you get from what they've done, what Kevin Warren did with this deal.
Let's
it also
also
seems like
I was just going to say, we're operating in a world of the present right now where the standard carrier of the conference is in the Big Ten East. The West has undergone a huge transformation. In order for all this to work, in order for all these pieces to fit together and there to be the right inventory, the West has got to hold up its end of the bargain. You have Wisconsin bringing in Luke Fickell. You have all of these changes. Nebraska bringing in Matt Rule. If 2 or 3 teams out of the West emerge, then that's more inventory that can work there, and maybe that Illinois-Wisconsin game suddenly becomes much more meaningful, and going to Camp Randall at night is going to draw the numbers that you want there. But just going back to the previous TV deal, let's not forget ABC got stuck with some stinkers in terms of, we're going to put on Ohio State or we're going to put on Michigan because they turn on television sets, and, well, damn it, we're going to have to put on, Ohio State, Rutgers. Damn it, we're going to have to put on Michigan, Indiana. That's just the way that things are going to have to work out at some points, and you're just going to have to deal with it. So, NBC or CBS or Fox or whoever can pound the table and say, we're paying a lot of money. We only want the most meaningful of games. Well, sorry, buddy, that's not how it always is going to work out. Blank happens, and you're going to get stuck with some things, and we're going to sit there, and the Big Ten is reduced how early they're releasing schedules and things of that nature in order to have maybe more balance or whatever. But there are going to be times that you're going to sit there and hope that Iowa Northwestern means something more than 6-3.
And there's no way there'll be 6 ranked teams every week throughout the season in the Big Ten. So one of these networks, if not 2 of them, are going to have a ranked team against an unranked team for their game. And that, as you just said, Indiana versus Ohio State or Northwestern versus Michigan, whatever it may be, is just examples. You were talking about the West needing to rise up and represent. What about the idea of just doing away with divisions, which I know Gene Smith would like, and I think that would create more value for that championship game if it's suddenly a top 10 matchup, and it is now suddenly basically for a bye into the quarterfinals of the playoff, as opposed to having to play in the first round. You figure both those teams as top 10 teams are going to be in the playoff, win or lose of that game. But, the stakes of that game, and aside from just that stupid trophy and Connor Cook, barreling over Archie Griffin on his way to the MVP trophy, are something tangible, that you get a bye to the final 8 in the playoff. I think that creates a little bit more of a television event, perhaps, to think about. But I don't know, do you guys for or against one division? I mean, it's kind of like, what's the point? If you have divisions, it limits the number of times USC and UCLA will play Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, because you aren't going to play 3 crossovers so in a given year.
I'll jump in really quick and then hand it over to Tony. 1 division, no divisions, 20 divisions, it doesn't matter. I'm really speaking on those teams. The art is formerly known as the Big Ten West. Even if you roll it all together, you've got to get more out of Nebraska. You've got to get more out of Minnesota. You've got to get more out of Wisconsin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have a couple of teams there instead of, okay, we know that the Big Ten West champion, or we know that out of there the ceiling is 8-3 or 9-3 or whatever. That's not going to fly. That's not going to move the needle. So, hopefully part of this rebirth in terms of where we see some of these programs going with new coaches and new directions will lead to a little bit more success on that side. But of course, it's a zero-sum game, and if the teams of the West, whether or not they're considered the West or not, if they get better, and you have these crossover games, does that bring the East back closer to them or not? And that'll all be interesting to see how that works.
I think one of the things that will initially, this looks like it harms the West going divisionless, but it gives them a new realistic, new realized target. Before, you only had to be the best team in the West. So that's all you had. That's all you had to fight for. That's all you had to work for. Now you're going to have to be one of the top. I think the Big Ten and with the 12-team playoff will generally get 3 teams in. That's probably the baseline. So you're going to have to be one of the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, and you can't do what you used to do. You can't just think of how Urban Meyer raised the level of the Big Ten coaches and Big Ten when he arrived, because everybody had to step up or else they were going to be left completely behind. You saw what happened at Michigan State. You saw, so like things got better. Coaches got better. With this, you can't just be, well, as long as we're 9-3 and shoot, 9-3 may get you in if the 3 losses are the right 3, but you can't be settling to be the best in the West. You're going to have to be in the top 3 in the Big Ten. And I think that takes a different kind of focus and different kind of talent pool and just a more serious brand of football. And so I think eventually this will help those teams realize what they need to realize. And I do like the Matt Rule hire. Obviously, everybody likes the Luke Fickell hire. So I think you're seeing things trend already in that direction. So I think ultimately it's good for the Big Ten, even though initially, the teams in the West are like, oh, this is bad news. Yeah, it is. So the fact that you think it's bad news tells you why you have not been winning the Big Ten championship.
So I guess Purdue didn't meet your standard last year, Tony, as the 42nd best team in the country with eventually 6 losses. That didn't quite hit the standard.
I'm just
Big
saying,
Ten Western Division champion.
They got the trophy. So, I can't take, they'll never be able to take that away from Jeff Brom.
In the end, in addition to the way Kevin Warren ruled the Big Ten Commissioner's office, as Steve so eloquently and displayed for us, in the end, it seems as though he thought, the dollar figure justifies anything. So if I walk out of this conference and I left a few loose ends, I left some collateral damage in terms of relationships and communications and details, $7 billion justifies all of it. So that's what you got.
You want to be warm or do you want to be rich? Warmth doesn't keep the lights on necessarily. If you want to sit there and have the bragging rights of having this gigantic, deal and everything else, you're gonna have to sit there and play ball a little bit. And at least credit to Ohio State for saying, fine, we'll take this November 11th game. I think that they're playing offense on defense. Okay, we certainly don't want to get stuck with something on the the week before Michigan. So we'll take our pill right there. We're going to sit there and get it set up. We can build this up as a pretty big recruiting weekend, even if it's even if Michigan State is Tuck ain't coming and whatever. You sit there and you get the opportunity to bring in players from across the nation because of obviously the later kick time and everything else. A lot of guys' seasons will already be done at that point because you're already well into playoffs for teams and everything else. But I think Ohio State made a pretty shrewd move by getting on board and just saying, that's fine. We'll do this, because let's not forget, before Kevin Warren and everything else, we're going to start playing Friday games. Big Ten's going to start playing Friday games, and Gene's like, oh no, we're not. I mean, but you have to at some point get out
Maybe
there.
You are.
Yeah, and if you have to take one for the team at some point, then take one for the team. And I mean, Ohio State's not tarnishing its brand. It's not really, I don't think, putting itself in a disadvantageous position or whatever. So you just go for it. And if you have that big of an issue with it, then what is it that you're trying to protect yourself from?
Yeah.
I just want to jump on these comments about Notre Dame ratings. I haven't looked at last year's ratings, but in 2021, there are only 2 weeks where there weren't multiple Big Ten games rated ahead of rated ahead of the Notre Dame game that week. One was when Notre Dame played on a Sunday, so they had all eyes on them. The other was when Notre Dame played Wisconsin. So Big Ten, even the secondary Big Ten game generally outrates Notre Dame games, let alone the ones that are on Peacock. But yeah, as Dave's not here says, ND doesn't have the Michigan and Ohio State bad game draw, and that's absolutely true. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, we've done a deep dive on these ratings from last year. They were quite enlightening, but not surprising. Yeah, of course, week one. You know, when you consider Ohio State and Notre Dame get together and they outdraw a game there in Florida State LSU that was by itself on a Sunday night, so there was no competition, and they get 3 more million viewers when there are competitive games and decent games all over the place on Saturday night. That tells you a whole lot right there. Yeah, Notre Dame Marshall, of course, that was a big upset. They probably drew in some fans in the fourth quarter, did 2.5 million. You've got a Wisconsin-Washington State game that did rather well that week.
Yeah, it went down to the wire.
Yeah, did better than Wisconsin did.
Yes. Yeah. Wasn't the most exciting game in terms of, the football flying through the air, but it was, 17-14.
Toledo at Ohio State doing better than Cal at Notre Dame, and you think that there would have been more viewers in there to sit there and rubberneck to see if the Notre Dame dumpster fire to start the season that year with losses to Ohio State and Marshall, what would happen there. And Ohio State still outdraws. I mean, the rating number is a little bit higher, but the viewers, Ohio State, did. I was told there'd be no math, like 140,000 more or whatever, according to the way that the ratings are. I mean, I guess that just goes to show that. I mean, that's Ohio State Toledo. I mean, I don't think DeQuan Finn had 2.2 million cousins that were watching the game.
Yeah, it really shows you Ohio State and Michigan's pull when you see that number. When you see these Michigan crap scrimmage games at the beginning of the season against UConn, Colorado State, and Hawaii, one of them did 4 million, just under 4 million on ABC at noon.
Yeah, I know one of the surveys said Ohio State for regular season drew almost 6 million viewers on average, and a lot of that was skewed, obviously, by Michigan at the end and Notre Dame at the beginning. And then in the playoff, obviously, the Georgia-Ohio State game was seen by over 20 million viewers and was even higher rated than the championship game, which obviously was like a 70-4 blowout or whatever the final score was. So, yeah, it was just kind of tells you, that there's interest in Big Ten and Ohio State.
This tells you a lot. Ohio State Rutgers, first of all, was the highest rated game on the Big Ten Network the entire season. And the Big Ten Network obviously gets the worst games, but there were a lot of games that they showed that were consequential to the Big Ten Western Division race, Illinois, Iowa, etc. A number of those. And Ohio State Rutgers did better than all of those. And that is also the only window the entire season that a Big Ten Network game outdrew an ESPN 1 game head-to-head.
Yep.
New York market.
Yeah. Yeah. That again.
That's where Jim Delaney came through. Yes.
We got markets 1, 2, and 3 in our hip pocket, babe. Who dis? So, who you think you are. So
Ohio State, Wisconsin was a bad football game. That was over after the first quarter. That was still the second highest rated game to Bama or Florida, Tennessee.
And so was Paul Chryst run at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
He just didn't know it yet.
Right. It took another week, but I think it was done at that point.
Mike, thank you for the Super Chat contribution. We appreciate that. Well, we won't go through the whole ratings for last season, but they are interesting. And we've got a full summer to dive into any of that if we so choose. Tell us about the Athlon's blunder, Steve.
Yeah, really interesting. I took my daughter to Washington, D.C. this past week for internship. And so they're all shopping at the Target, and there's a Barnes and Noble right next door. And I said, excuse me for just a moment. And I walked over there, just curious that it was May 2019, whatever. And go over, and they had the Barnes, or they had the Athlon magazine on the shelf. So I pick it up and I start thumbing through it. And I always, to fill my story quota, do a story about the Athlon magazine and what they have to say about Ohio State. And you see on the cover, it says very curiously, CFP Final Four right here, and lists the teams: Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Michigan. And that's not last year's Final Four, and it's presumably the coming season's Final Four. Well, then you flip through the pages of the magazine and you see they have USC in the top 4 instead of Ohio State. And Ohio State is relegated to the Orange Bowl to play Florida State, I think, is what they have picked out for them. So they have Ohio State going 11-1, I think. And, Michigan getting the better of them, I guess, because Michigan wins the Big Ten championship in their projection. So whatever. But interesting that to sell magazines, they have Ohio State listed in their Final Four. Tony, do you have your version of the one? Did you pick it up here in Columbus?
The edited version?
Yeah. You have the Billy Ripken card after the thing had been scratched off.
That would be F-face.
Yes.
That's it.
I do not have my Athlon magazine yet. I'm waiting for it to be on Audible because I can't. My vision is so bad these days, and that tiny print. I'm going back and forth if I'm going to get the Phil Steele magazine this year or not, because it gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
You need a magnifying glass,
and for whatever reason, like that ink, you get the tiniest amount of perspiration on that ink, and that whole page is ruined. So.
The problem is,
I would pay $1 more for the magazine if we could have a little bit better ink.
Well, the problem is you're squinting so hard it makes you sweat, and then now, but they do have it on digital.
What I like is Phil Steele is actively tweeting every day the 3 or 4 head coaches that he spoke to that day to get the actual, the real post-transfer portal, post-spring game, the actual 2 deep. For the coaches won't tell anybody anytime what their 2 deep is, but they are telling Phil Steele what the 2 deep is, and then his magazine comes out with names that you've never heard of sometimes in his 2 deeps, but he is pretty reliable, I have to say. But he's spoken to 100 of the 135 coaches. He says it goes to press in 2 weeks. And obviously that's the Bible that we all live by, because it's got all that factual research material in there, who did what to who on what day, what they were ranked, what the point spread was. And it's an amazing, amazing journal, no doubt.
Yeah, you can't necessarily use it as your only source, but you're screwing yourself if you don't use it as one of your sources.
A source, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
In week 12, I will pick it up. In week 12, I will pick it up and put it on the table as I'm doing my picks to see how USC has done against Notre Dame the last 5 years. Oh, they are 4-1 against Notre Dame the last 5 years. Boom, 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 boom. It goes right into my picks. So it's even useful in November.
Yeah, I mean, I've got last year's, and I'm usually I have like 3 years within arm's reach of me. But I do the same thing like every year. It's because Athlon is the first one out, so I buy that. And then I sometimes I may buy the Lindy's National, but I'll buy the Lindy's Big Ten. And then soon after that, Phil's magazine is out. And then I've got, my 3 every year. And do I read them cover to cover? No. And these just tied me over until Phil's magazine gets here. But that is only a reference. Like that, I only use that for work, really. I mean, but in terms of this Athlon, one of the things that stuck out to me, and I'll get your guys' opinion on this. Well, first of all, I did not put out usually every year I'm like, hey, college football magazines, if you actually want to get your Ohio State 2 deep close to accurate, hit me up. I'll help you out, because there's always something in whatever 2 deep. There's always something interesting or bizarre. And like this year's, Cameron Martinez, who was the number one nickel all spring long and played really well, is not even in the two deep in the athlon. Jacob James is the starting center. Obviously, he was out this spring, so who knows what his situation is going to be. Carson Hinsman is at guard, and he was at center all spring. Stuff like that, kind of just as an Ohio State beat guy. But no, of their first 3 All Big Ten teams, no Jack Sawyer anywhere.
Yeah. And who are without giving? I mean, go out and pick up your Athlon magazine. I'm here about people making a living, but who are their ends? I mean, who do they have on the?
Well, thing is, they only list them as defensive linemen, so I don't know all of these guys well enough to know who their ends are. And Michael Hall,
first team.
Yeah, Michael Hall is a third teamer. That's a little bit surprising. We'll see if he can do something about that. But no Steel Chambers. Denzel Burke, a second teamer. Lathan Ransom, a first teamer, which is a bit surprising to me. I do agree with having Will Johnson on the first team, though. He's going to be excellent for Michigan.
They have 8 Ohio State guys and 8 Michigan guys on the first team out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 25 names, all positions. So 16 of the 25 guys are Ohio State or Michigan. Doesn't leave a lot for everybody else to compete for. But, J.J. McCarthy's the first team quarterback in the Big Ten with Talia Tagovailoa second and Kyle McCord is third. And the running backs, Blake Corum and Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, with Donovan Edwards as an all-purpose back on the first team, Marvin Harrison and Mecca Egbuka, and then are on the first team, and Travion Henderson is a second-team pick at running back, which, if he's healthy and regains the form he had from 2 years ago, he could be the best of the lot. But, what do you know?
Do you guys know over the last since 2012, there's only been one time where there was an all Big Ten quarterback who wasn't a Buckeye. So this Kyle McCord, if he ends up starting, I think it's not an issue putting him third team here. He's only started one game, but whoever ends up starting Ohio State, if they start for 12 games in the regular season, they will be the first team all Big Ten quarterback because their numbers will show it. But just once in the last, 11, 12 years, has there been a quarterback from a Big Ten quarterback, not a Buckeye, being first team all Big Ten. Can you name him?
Ooh.
Connor Cook.
Boom. 2015, when Ohio State was splitting their quarterbacks.
Good one. Ba, ba, ba. I was going to do the Jeopardy music. We didn't.
Now
we get demonetized if we did that, so don't do that.
Yes, we don't stop.
Now, and then 2011 was the first year that there was no Buckeye as a first teamer, and that was Russell Wilson, who, of course, lost to Braxton Miller in Ohio Stadium.
I heard that 2011 was a bit of a clown show, so I don't know.
Yeah, but they still deserve to go to a bowl game, in Gene's opinion.
It was. What I come away from this, in all sincerity, going back to the Joe Philbin thing at the top of the show, is that there's just too much talent at Ohio State to not expect them to be in the top 4 and to be, and if they get this is my fervent belief that if they get the offensive line figured out and he can help Fry get it figured out, and that's who should be playing and what they're doing, the answers to those two questions, and maximizing their performance, there's no reason why they can't win it. There's just no reason. There's too much talent on this team. There's too much high-end talent on this team. Guys who are going to play in the NFL for about 10 years, or longer. There's too much of it on this team to deny that they shouldn't be in this mix.
It's good news that the next year's NFL draft is going to be in Detroit because it'll be a nice, easy.
We're going to get to go.
When Ohio State has quite a few guys that are going to be in that first round conversation. I think we've talked about it maybe on this show, certainly I've talked about in other shows, just the number of players for Ohio State who should be invited to the NFL scouting combine. And we went through this long list, and I said,
15.
If Kyle McCord has a big year, he could be a one and done. It could be I mean, it certainly could be record setting. We've talked about how like the COVID bubble kind of created this glut of like talent at Michigan that has really been instrumental in Michigan's 2 wins over Ohio State. Well, Ohio State's roster is kind of compacted at this point to where here in this 23 season, 24 draft class, it's going to be quite deep if players produce at levels that are expected. And this is not necessarily taking huge leaps and saying, okay, and this guy who, lightly regarded or whatever goes off and ends up being an All-American. I mean, these are guys that just are staying on the same trajectory that they've been on.
There are projections of 5, 6, and 7 first-round picks from Ohio State next year. And so that's what gives me – and then the odds, somebody posted odds for most of the games, like Ohio State favored by 24 in its opener at Indiana, favored by double digits over some of these teams that it's going to play. And I'm like, really? I mean, people must think they're going to be really, really good. So I know the Michigan game was 1 point for Michigan on one book and 2.5 points for Michigan on another, which is essentially the home field advantage. I mean, that's what you're giving them. And so they're basically viewing these teams as dead equal or Ohio State even just the smidge better. So, they know.
FPI had Ohio State as a significant favorite in the Michigan game, which again, Ohio State was a favorite in FPI in the previous 2. So you can't necessarily use that as a gold standard, but you can look at the numerical odds or whatever, but ESPN's little formula certainly likes Ohio State through all 12 games.
I will just say Michigan State 7 minutes ago just confirmed the Black Friday night game, 7:30 p.m. against Penn State.
I got to get my handy dandy Big Ten schedule that I've already started marking. And so you're saying that's been moved to Friday.
But it will be indoors at Ford Field.
Really?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I totally missed that.
Yes.
How cool is that?
Wow. I was just playing on Twitter too, right at that point, and I saw it right before Tony mentioned it. Yeah.
The words are gigantic, Ford Field. And it's like I didn't even see that part.
It's the Big Ten conference, guys. Just have some faith. They're going. It's the big money talks and bullcrap walks, and they don't care about renting that building. How much here? What do you need? What do you need here? Take whatever you need. Move the Lions game. Just take whatever you need. That's the day after the Lions. Now I know why the hotels are so bad in downtown Detroit. I was looking for a hotel in downtown Detroit for the Michigan game because I wanted to stay there as opposed to out by Ypsilanti or wherever. And now I know because people knew that it was coming, that there was going to be I'm like, the Lions play on Thursday. Why are people still staying in downtown Detroit on Friday night? Now I understand why the rooms are $400 and $500 in downtown Detroit, because it's Penn State versus Michigan State right downtown. So
no, there's a big poker tournament at Greektown. So
yeah, big poker tournament. Yeah.
So I guess then this probably leads into Purdue, Indiana hosting some November night games at Lucas Oil, perhaps.
Perfect. Book it. But I do believe that last week is going to be reserved for USC. I think that's just a tailor-made double play ball. Fox can't take it at noon. CBS would like to have it, but there's going to be, even if they don't get Ohio State, Michigan, and they don't get USC, Notre Dame, or UCLA, there's still going to be something tasty determining something back here in this hemisphere for a 3:30 game that day. And, the trade-off is you get Penn State, Michigan State, and CBS, they love Penn State because it goes back to their, romanticism of Todd Blackledge and Joe Paterno in 1982. They love Penn State. My God, they jumped out of an airplane to take Iowa at Penn State on September the 23rd. Boy, that's a big game. Whoa, can't wait, So, yeah. That was the first thought I had when I saw that, is like, what? Really?
Well, we have to see if Brian Ferentz can average whatever amount of points to keep his job. They took his job.
Good show. Good show. Appreciate everybody being here. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, Tony Girdman, Buckeye Huddle, Buckeye Weekly's the podcast. What's on the podcast this week, Tony?
Yesterday we dropped one talking about the Pete Thamel story on Kevin Warren and the Big Ten Network and all of that stuff. I think tomorrow we'll probably dive in on the Athlon magazine and some other stuff, Joe Philbin, things like that, whatever's happening.
Kevin, what's going on in your world this week?
I'm just recovering from Southern Swing. I have one more story that I'm still trying to figure out how to frame from that, and then I'll probably do a Big Me kickoff Thursday or Friday, kind of doing some stories from the road, and that should be that. And I don't know what Tony's laughing at or something. He must be getting excited for his chicken nuggies or something for lunch.
Chicken tenders.
Nuggies.
Boneless wings.
Boneless wings.
Oh, good Lord. What's
Chicken
the difference
tenders.
between a tender and a
My
boneless
daughter's
wing?
diet
Anybody
when
know?
she was 7.
Tenders and nuggies are not made from wing meat, so they are not boneless wings.
Oh, okay. I get it.
Well, I know, but
Now that you explain it, I get it.
well, you got it in one explanation. Tony still hasn't grasped this yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Folks,
I
we
get a
should be back
KFC.
here.
I get the 3-piece dark. I get the 2 thighs and the drum because I just think that's the best in the world. But that dry chicken breast,
I just get whatever Popeyes gives me because it doesn't matter what I order.
It's all good.
That is true.
Yeah.
I just went through a drive-through recently. It wasn't Popeyes, and my wife was in the car, and we got what we got, and we were laughing. It's just like, oh, we were at McDonald's breakfast, and I ordered like the bagel sandwiches are back, so I ordered like the bacon, bagel, and egg and cheese or whatever, and they're like, here you go, here's your sausage McMuffin. I'm like, what? I'm like, and they're like, well, I'm like, fine, it's all the same food. I don't care. Let's go.
I've been to a McDonald's probably twice in the last 6 months where I showed up and they said, we do not have any ground beef
Oh no.
at a McDonald's.
The
Shut
supply
the place down.
supply chain is real, babe.
Shut
Wow,
the place down. This is why
Before
you
COVID,
exist.
I went to a Popeyes once that not only was out of chicken, basically all this Popeyes had were like green beans and biscuits. And I was like, that's a problem. And they're like, I know our franchisee won't let us close down. You know, we haven't had our truck in 2 days or whatever. They're like, can I interest you in some green beans and biscuits? I'm like, no, you may not.
Hey, before my wife gets here, the supply chain was good under the last guy. I'll just say that. Supply chain was good under the last guy. Now she's getting ready to walk in. So
All right, folks. I think it's congratulations on episode 214. Let's get on to the next one.
2:15 could even be better, folks. You never know. Next Wednesday, most likely 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll see you then. Steve, Tony, Kevin, thank you for what you guys do. We will see you soon.